It did. And as you can see, you've had people like Microsoft with the 360, follow suit. And you've had Sony themselves really capitalize on it as well, because later on, when they did the PS3, that came out, I think about the same time, maybe before, maybe before or after the 360 or something, around the same time frame, I should say. The 360 stuck with Blu-ray. Now the only way, well, not Blu-ray, but with regular DVD playability. Now they did try to jump into the HD DVD / Blu-ray market with an attachment, but that didn't last too long. Sony said, you know what, we're going to again surpass you, and we're going to be a success by not only allowing people to play games on their, not only allow people to play games, I think they were able to do PS2 on the PS3, I'm not really sure. But not only allow them to do that, but allow them to play the newer PS3 games on Blu-ray, as well as watch DVD and Blu-ray movies. That was something that that Sony did with the PS3. Now, true, the PS3 did not succeed to the expectations that Sony wanted, and basically during that generational gap, it was Microsoft's time, it was Microsoft dominating. But Sony obviously learned from the mistakes, because they realized, you know what, yeah, it's great we have all this and that, but we need to focus more entirely on the games, as well as give them that platform to do movies as well, and thus you had the PS4 born. Now, to think that all came from the fact that the Sony PS1 20 years ago came out and revolutionized gaming as we know it, is saying something. And in a sense, Sony actually has Nintendo to thank for this, Nintendo and Philips to thank for this, because if it wasn't for Nintendo and Philips going behind their back, we wouldn't have a PlayStation franchise right now, would we? Now, of course, as I mentioned, Sega had the Sega Saturn going on at that same time, so they were still in the console race, even though they were slowly dying. Now, the Sega Saturn didn't last that long, and it would be about a year and a half later in Japan, if from our standpoint here in the U.S., it would be about a year and a half later in Japan that we'd be introduced to the Sega Dreamcast, which is this. Now, what was interesting about the Sega Dreamcast, from what they advertised in Japan and from what was advertised here, was not only was it going to be Sega's newest gaming console, and of course among the time, probably among certain circle and groups of people, be the last gaming console that Sega would ever do, but Sega decided to basically lead the way for what games would be like today. Now, Sega has been innovative in some areas. Many people may not know this, but if you watch The Gaming Historian and other video channels that talk about this, Sega actually created the Sega Channel. Now, this Sega Channel was basically in the shape of a gaming cartridge that you could plug into your Sega Genesis, or your 32X, depending on whichever system, or even your Saturn. But it was a gaming service that you could get through your cable company. Basically, you would have to connect a coax cable, if you will, to this Sega Channel cartridge, and there you go. Now, it would only be supplied on certain certain cable companies would supply this. Now, did the Sega Channel succeed? It was a mild success, but not really. But it did open the door for the possibility that something like this could become a reality. Because let's not kid ourselves. The people over at Sega Japan, they realized, you know what? We can take what we tried with the Sega Channel and we can bring it to here. This way, nobody has to rely on a cartridge or anything like that. They don't have to rely on the cable which a lot of us do nowadays anyway, the cable to provide internet or provide the download, provide the service that they need, and we don't have to charge them. Now, true, I think there was a subscription or some kind of service or something like that that allows you to go online, but still, they never charged people. They never did. They never really did. Now, I think they did, but at the time I think it dropped. But now, like I said, when this came out, even though amongst certain circles in the industry who pretty much knew this could be Sega's last console, Sega decided to go out with a bang, and they did. Sega went out with a bang by not only making this the newest console, but they decided, you know what, we're going to bring in the games we're going to distribute the games that need to be distributed, that fans want us to distribute. And the game that came with this, well, it's not on me right now, but let me go get it. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry for taking a little long there. My Optimus Prime MP1 fell, so I had to put it back up. But anyway, like I said, the game that came with the Sega Dreamcast was, of course, Sonic Adventure. And this, of course, as a lot of us probably know, got ported over to Nintendo when Nintendo made a deal when Nintendo decided to make a deal for the new GameCube system to release two basically special edition director-cut versions of Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. Now Sonic Adventure, like a lot of consoles, Sonic Adventure, like a lot of games before it, became the package game for the Genesis. And the Genesis proved to be a huge success, even though it would be Sega's last console. Because graphic capability-wise, it was superior. If you take a look at the graphics to the PS1, it blew the PS1's graphics away. The only problem was it was going up against, at the time, Sony's unveiling and debuting of the successor, that's the word I was looking for earlier, the successor to the PS1, that being the PS2. They were going up against that. And the PS2's graphic capability was even more superior. Because again, like I said, not only could you play games on DVD disc, but you could watch DVD movies as well. But still, Sega wasn't going out without a fight, and they provided good games for the Sega Dreamcast. I remember, them advertising this, and it was at a decent price, even though I couldn't afford it. Ironically, years later, when I moved out on my own, and the gaming exchange people across the street from where I lived had one, I said, you know what? I'm going to get the thing, and that's it. And that's what I did. I ended up getting the Dreamcast. Now, true, I also got my Nintendo GameCube from the same people, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to get the Dreamcast, and this was like years later. I'm going to get the Dreamcast because I've always wanted it, and after I played Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube, as well as Sonic Adventure DX, I wanted to get this. I wanted to get the original and see if it worked just as well, and it does. And ironically, a lot of people are still waiting for a third edition to this series because they pretty much feel this is the best thing they got going for Sonic. Now, the other thing about the Dreamcast that made them a little bit more popular, even though it would be the last console for Sega, would be the controller. Now, some people look at this controller and they pretty much say, why would you have the wires here and not here? It'd be like you're trying to play the system like this. And maybe that was the intention. You know, maybe that was the intention. We're not really sure. But that doesn't make any sense. Because a lot of us are used to playing games like this. I can only assume that they made it this way just to be a little bit more different. And they did. Believe me, they did. Now, another thing that made them more interesting was the fact that this controller, believe it or not, was inspirational for the Microsoft controllers as well. Because you notice the A, X, Y, and B are very similar, but they're different color schemes on the Xbox controllers than they are here. But you could tell there was inspiration there, and it was also there was some kind of inspiration there because you could see the similarities. If you know what I mean. You have your triggers, you have your analog, which would become two analogs, and you have your D-pad. So basically, you can kind of see it was an inspiration for what the Xbox controller would be like. So that was cool and everything. So that was all cool and everything, and probably in the eyes of some. I mean, yeah, some didn't really like how the controller was designed. I mean, but hey, Sega's trying to go out with a bang, trying to show that hey, they can still innovate, still be different. Why not? But here was the one thing that really sold people on the controller, despite its design. It was this. If I can get it out. It was your memory card. It was your VA or your VG memory card. And basically what this thing did was it not only saved your memory, but it allowed you to play like little mini games on it, because when you take a look at it, it's in the shape of a freaking game controller. Almost like a GameCube, if you will. So not only could you play little mini games on it, but it also saved your memory. And when you played your game, this little LED screen would light up showing you the game, showing you the characters, what the game was about, etc. Now apparently when it came to the Chow Gardens in Sonic Adventure, this became a very important element. Now, as I mentioned with the PS1, one of the things that made them different was, of course, their audio-video adaptations. Now, of course, this still plugged in, as you could see. Now, of course, this plugged into your coax cable. Basically, if you had an extension, like a splitter or whatever, this plugged into your cable. Here was your cable part, but here was the part that went into your Sega Saturn. This thing went into your Sega Saturn, and just like with the PS1, it was different, if not more cutting edge, because it was more modernized, more flat, more like letting you know that this is the evolution of gaming systems as you know it. Another thing about the Sega Saturn, as a lot of people pointed out in their reviews, either be, although reminiscing, either be Alpha Omega Sin or the Gaming Historian. One of the things about it, of course, was, like I mentioned, the dot was the internet connection. Now, the internet was basically was kind of fairly new at that time. Like I said, it was not. I mean, the internet had always been around, let's face it, but not at the level as it was getting from a public standpoint. to where everybody, myself, yourself, anybody included, could actually access the internet. It was becoming more public, it was becoming more of a regular daily, day-by-day thing. So when Sega brought out the Dreamcast, they decided to take full advantage of it. Now let's not forget that at the time, the internet was mostly done up by dial-up connection only, which mainly meant, depending on your service, you could either get this at 56 to 128K. That was it. That was it. Now, true, there were some cable companies at the time that was toying with the idea of it doing internet through the cable systems, but it wasn't just there yet. So you still had to rely on Verizon, you still had to rely on AT&T, Pacific Bell, Southwestern Bell, SBC Global, like I said, AT&T, all these other phone companies just to get that connection. But Sega themselves, they took full advantage of it. They said, you know what? We're going to allow people to play stuff online. And they did. And that's where this came into play. This little thing here was the extension for your internet connection to your phone system. Now the only problem with that, and thankfully they fixed this as internet has become more evolved and been more wireless, if not more cable friendly and all that. When you would play your games, and even I know this because I would hook my computer up as well and I'd be on the internet. When you would play your games, or being on the internet period, you couldn't call anybody because people couldn't get through to you because you were on the internet. They would hear a me, me, me kind of sound, and they would know, oh great, this person's on the internet, I need to talk to them. And with the addition of the Dreamcast, they pretty much knew that if you weren't on the internet, you were playing the freaking Dreamcast. Now of course, Sony again bested Sega at this. Because Sony knew that there was other possible ways to, play online. True, they had their dial-up connection option on the back of the thing, but they also had, well, it was a dial-up thing. What it was with the PS2, and I'm very fortunate to have bought one with this connection, or with this adapter, was you had to buy an adapter for it. But this adapter, believe it or not, allowed you to play the online through cable. Like I said, there was a lot of cable companies that were testing the idea of going in that direction with internet. But they also still had the dial-up option as well. So that was the one area, even through an adapter and then through the redesigns and all that later on, Sony had Sega beat at. They were able to allow people to go online, but allow them to go online not just through dial-up, but through cable. But again, Sega wouldn't go out without a fight. And Sega did everything they could to remain. Now, of course, Sega does a lot of things as well. Now here obviously was for an extension, I think, for compute. Now right here, you could actually disconnect this. Believe it or not, you could actually disconnect this if you don't want internet. Because guess what? This could also be sold. You could also at the time buy a Dreamcast without this, and this would be sold separately. But a lot of people would buy the combo set. But overall, Sega back in 1999 really went out with a bang when it came to the Dreamcast. They started hammering out game after game after game after game after game, and they went out with a bang. And believe it or not, according to some sources, there are still some games, even though they're independently developed, there are still some games being released and independently developed and released, I should say, for the Dreamcast even today, 16 years later. Same could be said for the PS1. There's a lot of PS1 games that are independently being developed and released. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. it's kind of like in the same veins as you would have